coordination of their muscles. We're going to talk about cerebral palsy and different types here, but you probably covered some things in this Crawford's class, I imagine. You know, like, have you talked about like ataxia? I mentioned it here and there. So that's like a fluctuating muscle tone. It's jerky movement. It's poor coordination. There's athetosis. That's another form of cerebral palsy, and that's poor coordination. So it could be a coordination issue. Remember I said some of the infants don't have the suck, swallow, breathe rhythm down. I mean, you can have coordination issues in your mouth, just like you can anywhere else on your body. So it might be something like that. So some of the symptoms that you might see for the little ones, they can't suck, swallow, breathe well. They might be coughing after they eat, or just having difficulty maintaining like a grasp on the nipple. They might be, not latching or letting go because they're not able to breathe. So they're just letting go. They might not be able to move food laterally in the mouth. Remember we talked about tongue lateralization, where your tongue actually pushes food in between your teeth. So you'll check that out today too. So maybe that's not happening. Or they just can't coordinate that. So their tongue's moving. It's not like it's paralyzed, but it's just not effectively, you're not chewing, pushing the food, chewing, pushing the food. They just can't coordinate all that. They can't form a good bolus. They can't move the bolus back to their, in their mouth effectively. Food might slip off the sides of the tongue into the pharynx before intended swallow, because if you can't coordinate, there's a chance that you're going to take this food in and you're not going to have it chewed. Boluses are going to be formed before it moves back to the pharynx for a swallow, and that is a choking risk and aspiration risk. So aspiration, we just talked about this a couple weeks ago in gerontology, or last week. Coughing during eating could be a sign. Rattling or wet sound during breathing could be a sign. So what we do, we're going to try some oral motor exercise. Think about what you would do for poor coordination of fine motor skills. You're going to try to improve the coordination. So some oral motor exercise to work on issues like tongue movements, coordinating tongue movements. I worked with a little boy that could not lateralize his tongue. He couldn't stick his tongue out past his lips. It was really interesting. So anything he was going to eat, he put it in his mouth. That tongue couldn't push it over to the side of his mouth. If you didn't put the food to the side of his mouth, and even then it was a problem because he couldn't move it around, he would just have to press his tongue up to the roof of his mouth and smush the food. And this was like a kid in school. I mean, this was like a 6-year-old boy when I started seeing him. This really trying to do that. So that was heavy duty, like oral motor work. Between OT and a speech therapist, he had other issues too that I was addressing. So you want to work on that. Beckman protocol, those are mouth exercises, stretching of the mouth, strengthening, and that sort of thing. But that's like one of those protocols that I was talking about that you want to get additional training on. But they're out there, and you'll hear that if you go to work with the pediatric population, you'll eventually hear Beckman protocol. It's like real popular. For coordination, positioning is the key. Again, don't have kids eating with their feet dangling. You know what I mean? If someone doesn't have good control over their body movements, you want to give them the most stable, the most amount of stability that you can provide them from outside sources. So you want to make sure that they're sitting in that 90-90-90. You want to make sure their feet are on the floor. If it's a child that really has a lot of coordination issues, like athetosis or something, you want them well supported across the board. Because we're talking about mild issues to severe coordination issues. Athetosis is like this writhing. Anytime they try to move, their body just kind of like writhes. So as they're trying to chew, they're just moving constantly. So like for that child, I might have, if they're in a wheelchair, I might feed them in their wheelchair with their chest strap on to kind of limit some of that as much as possible so they can have better success with eating. So think about how they're positioned, make sure that they never have neck extension for any feeding. And then think about your food consistency too. If they have problems moving their tongue around their mouth, just like that little boy that I described, you can't put a piece of meat in his mouth. You know what I mean? He's not going to be able to chew it. You could place it between his teeth, but chances are it's not going to get to where it's supposed to go safely. So we need to think about that. So some foods like soft macaroni and cheese, you know what I mean? Something that can be smushed up. Yogurt for protein, you know, soft cheeses and stuff like that. Kids that have trouble, or even adults that have trouble with coordinating their mouth movements and safe swallow, first of all, there are different food consistencies. Okay, so there's puree food, there's soft mechanical food, there's chopped food, and usually there's someone like a dietitian kind of, you know, telling you what this person can eat and so forth. But think about the thickness of foods and stay away from foods with a mixed consistency. That is the most difficult thing for people to swallow that have swallowing issues. So, for example, like a fruit cup that has liquid and solid, soup that has chunks of stuff that need to be chewed, vegetables and or meat. The liquid wants to roll back, but they're still working on chewing. So it's kind of like if there's coordination issues, that is the worst combination to give them. Milk and cereal, you see what I'm saying? Two different consistencies. All right, sensory issues. Signs and symptoms of hypersensitivity. So you guys, are you familiar with hypersensitivity? You talked about it a little bit while you were in the classes because we haven't covered it specifically in PEDS, but they're too sensitive. Things feel awful. Like what feels normal to me on my face would be so noxious to somebody that they want to like just scrub it off or push you away or whatever. So this can happen on the outer part of the mouth. This can happen on the inner part of the mouth. Remember we talked about those kids that don't put stuff in their mouth while they're growing up. They don't explore with their mouth. They don't eat well. They don't put stuff in their mouth. They could very well be hypersensitive to oral stimulus later down the road. These kids oftentimes don't like a toothbrush or spoon in their mouth. People say, oh, they're just really picky eater. I'll kind of try to figure out what's going on with them to see what kind of patterns the child has as far as food textures. Like if this kid only wants soft foods, you know what I mean? Like you can go, oh, do they like crunchy foods, do they like salty foods, do they like sweet foods? Kind of, do they eat cold foods? How about hot foods? You can kind of see what kind of sensory issues might be present. The hypersensitive child, you probably won't like something with a whole bunch of texture, like crunchy chip. Probably doesn't want the ice cold popsicle. They're going to want more bland foods, and they're going to want softer, foods. So that's what you might see hypersensitivity. So this is the fun part. So when kids are hypersensitive, you have to desensitize. That's going to be your goal for therapy. So you want to desensitize because these kids won't even let their parents. I'm not kidding you. I've worked with kids where the parent had to sit on the child and hold their mouth open to get a toothbrush in it. Like this was an older child with their teeth in their mouth, not a baby, and those teeth had to get cleaned. And that's how hypersensitive he was. So sometimes we get that, and if it's not addressed early, it could turn into a behavior. So even though the sensation might be decreased and maybe they're a little bit more tolerant of the sensation, it's like a learned behavior. Did you ever eat something that made you sick and you never want that again? Not because it's going to make you sick again, just because you associate it with that sick feeling. That can happen here too. So it's really important to address this as early as possible. Okay, so desensitization, First of all, if their mouth is sensitive, more than likely something else on their body is sensitive. Maybe it's their whole body. So check for that first. Treat the whole body, not just the mouth, if that is the case. So here, these are key. So for hypersensitivity, this is what you want to do. Apply deep pressure. Deep pressure is calming and soothing. Doesn't this kind of go along with what you've learned about, I don't know what you're learning in there, but right? To decrease muscle tone, to calm. Think about massage. Deep pressure is calming. It's relaxing. It'll loosen muscles, and it could help decrease sensitivity. So for deep pressure, I might put some gloves on my hands, or maybe not, if I'm just staying on the outside of the mouth. And I would apply deep pressure to the child's face before toothbrushing, before feeding. That could be a strategy that you use. Inside their mouth, put a glove on your finger and massage the gums with deep pressure, not a light touch. Everything should be nice and firm, deep pressure. So those are things that you can do. That's going to help desensitize, right? Make them more tolerant of food they have to eat, toothbrushing, and so forth. And then you want to kind of grade it from there. So say you go to a child and you apply some deep pressure on their face, and they're good, they let you do it. Maybe you put a glove on, apply some deep pressure on their gums, and they're good, and that's like great. Well, your finger's smooth, right? So you really haven't introduced much texture, but they let all that happen. So then from there, you want to make it even more challenging, right? So you might use a tool. You might use a tool. My oil loader box is messy. Well, I can't have the one that I want, but this one is good. Well, you can use a tool. You can use something that's like smooth to start. These are called new brushes, and we have a smooth one somewhere else to go over and find it. And these can be just, you can purchase these. You can find them in, well, it used to be Babies R Us, but that's not there anymore. So like Babies R Us used to have a little child oral kit, and they had what looked like this, but it was smooth. And it was rubber, so it was very similar to this, but you can, the child is tolerating your finger. Maybe you want to add a little texture, so you go to this little nubby brush. This still isn't as offensive to them as a toothbrush with bristles, because that's a really light, feeling on their gums and their teeth and stuff. So you might move to something like this. So take this and rub it around their mouth to try to desensitize. So they do really good with this. You might go to something that has a little vibration to it. This is called a Z-Vibe, and you can turn this on. This one works. It has like a pretty intense vibration to it, and you might use this. There's varying tips. Some are more smooth than others. You can change the tips out, and you might start on the outside of their mouth and then work to the inside of their mouth, see if they'll tolerate it. If a child doesn't like toothbrush, do you think you're going to be able to get this in their mouth right away? No. So you have to, this is like, if they tolerate this, they're doing pretty good. So you have to grade this stuff. You have to grade it. Here's another vibration type tool. So you can, that's not right. Here we go. Put this up your finger, and this can go on the outside of the mouth, it can go on the inside of the mouth. Either one of these tools can. So those are some things that you might use. There are different texture tips for this as well. This is a different vibration than that, so you should check that out. I had another tool that I like to use, and this one, the battery's like stuck in there and I can't change it, and this one's, I don't have the tool to open this. So these also vibrate. But they're even a different form of vibration. This is I'll get something from the PEDS lab later to give you the feel of vibration, something similar. But it's where this is like very intense and like, I don't know how else to describe it, but like the vibration's like condensed, you know? This is looser and a little stronger. So, you know, you might try different tools that have a different vibration to them. So vibration can be used to desensitize, but that's not your go-to right away. Usually it's like depressure.
Sarah, is for the outside of the mouth, or do you use the inner one?
So yeah, you wouldn't put this in the mouth. That would be, could you get this open wide? No, but you know what I've used this one for? When we go into the hyposensitive child with hyposensitivity, I've used this to put food on. And this little, the elephant's wiggling and jiggling, you know, and they have to eat the food off of it. Not for the sensitive child, though. And the other thing while we're over here, let me show you this. Someone that's sensitive, look at this. Nice, smooth spoon, no metal, because metal can be, you know, noxious inside the mouth. But this would be the way to go for someone that is hypersensitive. Give them a utensil that doesn't set them off. You know what I mean? Little bit of food on there so they're not gagging because there's too much food. So the ring spoon is a nice thing to use. You know, they have those for littler mouths, those little baby, those spoons that are coated in plastic for babies or rubbery. You can try some different utensils. All right, so progression of input, nuke brush I just showed you, Z-Vibe I just showed you. Play activities involving input to the mouth. So remember we were blowing bubbles with the kid that had weakness? Well, if you're trying to desensitize someone, you want them to use that part of their body, right? So getting them to use their mouth to do things like blow bubbles, maybe see if they'll tolerate a straw and have them blow through the straw. There's cotton balls over there, you can make little games, blow through the straw, you know, to make a picture, to blow a cotton ball or whatever.
We saw them like put soap and water in a bucket and then have like the big straws that kind of like accordion out and blowing bubbles like in a bucket. That was like, seemed to be a popular.
And kids, you know, kids will love that.
Oh yeah.
Tasting and eating activities, that's important. Like you want them to get accustomed to regular foods or foods that they don't want, rather. And but just don't do it at meal times. So like there's actually little programs out there. And for instance, like there's a program and I kind of just like, it kind of morphed into something that I wanted it to be, you know, I just kind of made it my own, but it was just a little tasting thing. So it was like, you had to, on the plate, this was during therapy, this was not mealtime, on the plate, there were like 2 preferred foods and 2 non-preferred foods. So they got to eat their food that they liked, you know, and then the foods that they didn't like, we would play a little game with it. So you would have to, so I remember it now, you'd have to pick it up the first time and maybe give it a fish kiss, I think I called it. Just kiss the food, put it back down. You don't have to eat it today. You know, maybe reintroduce that same food. And the next time you're gonna do a lion lick. We're gonna be a lion and lick the food. Then the next, you know, if they tolerate that well, then I'd go to the next step. If they didn't, maybe it'd be the next week. And then a chipmunk chew, you know, and so forth until you can get them to eat it, you know. But this is like really an issue for kids. Like they're gonna gag, they're gonna vomit, they're gonna cry. I mean, if they are really truly hypersensitive, they do not want this in their mouth. So it's not just like, oh, they're just being, you know, naughty kids and not want to eat because they want sweets. Sometimes that is the case, but you gotta rule that out. Sometimes it really is hypersensitivity. So you can do little games and activities. If they're only eating soft foods because they're hypersensitive, or maybe even there's a structural problem or a muscle problem, coordination problem, you can slowly add texture to the food. If they're only eating applesauce, you want to crumble something into that applesauce eventually, or get chunky applesauce. So you see what I'm saying? You're just grating it. If they only eat yogurt, that's the only texture they'll allow in their mouth. You need to make it a little chunkier. Eventually, you want to, you know, add foods to it until they tolerate that, and just kind of work your way up as far as food textures.
Alright,